of how he was ridiculed and put to work by his brother, how his father tried to help him but did not succeed. And then the chapter ended with the dacoits trying to make a sacrificial offering of Jat Bharat. And then goddess Kali appears from the deity form and cuts off the head of the dacoit leader, and accompanied by her associates, they drink the blood. So that was the understanding of the character of Jat Bharat. This chapter talks about the discussion. The title of the chapter is Discussion between Jat Bharat and Maharaj Rahugana. The chapter has 25 verses, and the flow of the chapter is rather straightforward, even though the purports are kind of long because of the philosophical nature. But the flow is that there was once a king by the name of King Rahugana, and he was traveling in a palanquin. So the palanquin, as you know, requires 4 people to carry. And by some circumstance, one of the person was not available. So the leader of the palanquin carriers, they saw Jat Bharat sitting around, and they saw that he was physically strong, stout limbs, and intellectually he seemed to be retarded. So they considered him to be a good candidate for carrying the palanquin, and Jat Bharat does not object. But while he's carrying the palanquin, he walks in a very erratic way, because he's looking at the ants on the ground, and he's being careful so as to not step on them. And the palanquin, of course, requires the 4 carriers to be walking in synchronization. So because of the erratic walk of Jat Bharat, the palanquin was constantly getting jostled. And the king sitting aside the palanquin, he repeatedly chastises Jat Bharat. And Jat Bharat responds to his chastisement with a very philosophical reply. So then, hearing the philosophical reply of Jat Bharat, Rahugana, he understands that Rahugana is well versed in the scriptures. So seeing the reply, he understands that this is not an ordinary person. So he immediately begs forgiveness from Jat Bharat and begins to ask questions for clarification. And that sets the basis for, so from 5:10, the next 5 chapters, all the way to 14, is the conversation between these 2 great personalities, Jat Bharat and Maharaj Rahugana, which covers various aspects of material and spiritual life. So we will start with the first verse. So this is in prose. Sayan Prabhu, if you can read the translation.
Yes, Prabhu. Sukadev Goswami continued. My dear king, after this, King Rahugana, ruler of the state known as Sindhu and Sovira, was going to Kapil Ashram. When the king chief palanquin carrier reached the bank of the river Ishumati, they needed another carrier. Therefore, they began searching for someone. And by chance, they came upon Jat Bharat. They considered the fact that Jat Bharat was very young and strong and had firm limbs like cows and asses. He was quite fit to carry load. Thinking in this way, although the great soul Jat Bharat was unfit for such work, they nonetheless unhesitatingly forced him to carry the palanquin.
And so this is the setting of the story. That King Rahugana was on his way to Kapila Ashram. It says he was a ruler of Sindhu and Sovira, which is essentially to the west of, on the western bank of India. And Kapila Ashram, as you know, is on the eastern bank of the where the river Ganges meets the Bay of Bengal. But it does not say that he was traveling from his kingdom, because it would be unreasonable for a palanquin to carry him all the way across the country. But he was at some point on his way to Kapila Ashram, and he was being carried on a palanquin. Kings generally travel on horses, but because of some circumstances, he was traveling on a palanquin. And then we see the significance of Kapila Ashram. That he's meditating on, obviously going into, it's a tirth space, a holy place. And when he hears the exalted talks of Jat Bharat, he thinks that actually Lord Kapila has come. So that's one relevance we'll see later on. Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad, he says that in the previous chapter, we see that Jat Bharat, he gave his mercy to the leaders of the dacoit by arranging for his liberation, because he saw Goddess Kali in person and because he saw Jat Bharat directly, right? So the leader of the dacoits were in the mode of ignorance, and Jat Bharat liberated them. Then he also gave mercy to his brothers and neighbors who were in the mode of passion. Right? His brothers were Karamkandis, the neighbors were also materialistic. But by allowing them to see his form for a considerable period of time, he gave them mercy. And now we will see that he gives mercy to King Maharaj Rahugana, who is in the mode of goodness. So even though some of his activities here will seem like there's a mode of passion and ignorance, him getting angry and chastising, but the modes, of course, are not steady. One comes, the other comes, but later on, based on the realizations that the king shares, then we understand that he's well versed in the scriptures and is in the mode of goodness. So even though Jat Bharat was a Paramhamsa, which means that he himself did not distinguish on the bodily platform. Like we see, he gave appropriate mercy to people in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness. But being a Paramhamsa is unable to make that distinction, because the Paramhamsa thinks that I'm the lowest and everybody else is more exalted than me. But in order to preach and give mercy, the Mahabhagavad will come down to a lower platform and make this distinction. So we see how Jat Bharat is making distinction. Like to Maharaj Rahugana, who is in the Satogun, he will preach the highest philosophy from the scriptures. To the leaders of the dacoit who were in Tamoguna, he arranges for them to be killed. But by getting killed, they are getting liberation, right? So he is making that distinction, but he is doing it in order to give mercy appropriately. Because if the leaders of the dacoit were given the scriptural references, they would not make any sense of it, right? And Maharaj Rahugana definitely would not have deserved to be killed or treated in that way. So in an appropriate way, he is given mercy. So we see the example of Lord Shiva, who himself is a Mahabhagavat, but when he met the Prachetas, then he showed great pleasure. That means he recognized in the Prachetas that they were strongly in the mode of goodness. And that's why he showed special pleasure, right? He glorifies them, that I'm pleased by your sense of cooperation, I'm pleased by your submissive attitude to your father, I'm pleased by your desire to perform austerities. All these are qualities of the mode of goodness, right? And Lord Shiva, being Mahabhagavat and completely transcendental to these distinctions, still makes those distinctions in order to give his mercy and preach. according to some commentators, this particular interaction between Jat Bharat and Maharaj Raghunath was also for the benefit of Jat Bharat. That by this conversation, his own Gyan and Vairagya and Bhakti increased manifold. Just like when an elevated personalities talk, then everybody benefits. The speaker, the audience, the other people who are listening. So according to some commentators, that while Maharaj Raghunath was the obvious benefactor, but Jat Bharat himself benefited. So we see this this distinction being made also by Lord Mahaprabhu when he was preaching, especially when he was in the sannyasi mood when he was preaching. Then to the common persons, he gave them Harinam. He said, just chant and dance and be happy, right? Then to the Gyanis, like Prakashananda Saraswati and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he spoke the Vedanta philosophy. He spoke high philosophy. And then to even more intimate associates like Ramananda Roy, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, he spoke the more esoteric Bhakti Tattva. So being the personality of Godhead, obviously he is beyond Mahabhagavat, but he made this distinction for the benefit of the recipient. Okay, verse 2.
The palanquin, however, was very erratic, carried by Jat Bharat, due to his sense of non-violence. As he stepped forward, he checked before him every 3 feet to see whether he was about to step on us. Consequently, he could not keep pace with the other carrier. Due to this, the palanquin was shaking, and King Rahugana immediately asked the carrier, "Why are you carrying the palanquin this unevenly? Better carry it properly."
So Prabhupada writes a nice purport to this, where he says that a Vaishnava is kind to all living entities, not just to other devotees or other human beings. In quotes Kapila Dev, he says, Surda Sarvadehina, that he's a well-wisher of all living entities. Right? So Prabhupada explains why. Because the Vaishnava perception is that Krishna is the supreme father of all life forms, not just the human, but the animals, the plant form. So they're all children of Krishna. So the Vaishnavas take care not to annihilate untimely or unnecessarily any life form. And Prabhupada explains why. Because every soul is allocated a certain number of years in a certain life form. And then they transmigrate to a higher form. And killing an animal or a living being, it just puts an impediment in this advancement. Prabhupada says that it's an impediment in the way of his completing his term of imprisonment in a certain body. One should therefore not kill for one's son's gratification, for this will implicate one in sinful activity. So we see also here that the king is engaging Rahugana and other bearers in terms of carrying him. Even though the king was young and strong and physically capable, but he is riding on the backs of others. And Devamrit Swami, he says that the present-day leaders may not be traveling on the backs of others, but they're nevertheless traveling on the backs of the earnings of other people. So which is the same, that when a person spends their energy into earning money and the leaders are stealing that money, it is as good as them forcing the others to carry them by their effort. And then he notes one other difference also. He says that the current day leaders, when they travel, they need to be protected. Right? So when the president goes, then there is a whole production that happens prior to that, especially for the US president. The Secret Service goes many days in advance and they establish all perimeters and protocols. And when the president goes, and then there is all this protection going on. So he said the current leaders, they go and they need to be protected, but the leaders of the past, they went in order to give protection. They didn't need any protection, but they were in that position because they went to protect others. So the palanquin carriers, they were suffering at the hands of the king because the king was forcing them to carry the palanquin. Now, he may be giving them some remuneration, whatever, but there was physical distress in carrying the king. So they wanted to pass it on to Jet Bharat. That is material nature. That one is very eager to share one's suffering, but is not very eager to share one's good fortune. In the spiritual conception, it is the opposite. So we see the example of Sripad Ramanujacharya, that he went to his guru, Shiksha Guru, Goshtipurna, to get the Narayan mantra. And I believe he went like 17 times. And 17 times Goshtipurna said no. And then finally Ramacharya says, if you don't give it to me, I will give up my body. And then Goshtipurna, he understands his sincerity. So he gives him the mantra, and he also gives him makes him promise that do not repeat this mantra. It's so powerful. Do not repeat this mantra to anybody else. Ramacharya promises. Then he hears the mantra in his ear. And then when he hears the mantra in his ear, he becomes completely enlightened. And then what does he do? He does not even wait to go home. On the way back to home, he climbs up upon a cliff. And there he tells everybody, come, come, come. I have a special gift to give you. And then the mantra that Goshtipurna had given him, he gives it to everybody. And Goshtipurna then, by the way, does anybody know what that mantra was?
Om Namo Narayanaya.
Yes. Om Namo Narayana. That was the mantra that was given. So then Goshtipurna says that, what kind of a person you are? You promised me. And then I have a relationship of a guru to you. And then you did not even wait. You immediately went and broke your promise. You know that you will suffer countless lifetimes in hell. And Ramacharya said, yes, and I'm willing to suffer it just for the benefit of others. So that's the Vaishnava nature. That if they get any good fortune, they're very eager to share. Prabhupada, he was already liberated, but he undertook all this suffering to share his good fortune. And that's the opposite nature of spirituality. So we see in Jet Bharat, 4 kinds of compassion are displayed by him. That Jet Bharat was forced to carry the palanquin, but he still wanted to protect the ants. So even though he was personally in difficulty, he was anxious to show compassion to others, knowing that it might put him in more difficulty. Right? That was the first kind. Then the second is it's not really 4 kinds of compassion, it's the 4 aspects of compassion. A little bit of semantics here. So the first aspect of the compassion is that regardless of what situation you are in, good or bad, it is shown to other people. It's absolute. Right? Jet Bharat is showing compassion to the ants. The second is that the compassion is spontaneous. It is not at a theoretical platform, but it manifests in practical actions. Now, in this case, Jat Bharat, he could have analyzed the results of his protecting the ants vis-a-vis him placing, the consequences of displeasing the king, and he could have reasoned out that yes, I may protect the ant, but if I do protect them, then the king will be angry and may kill me. So what's the best thing to do? Self-preservation, ant preservation. So that would be the more deliberate, theoretical platform. But compassion is by nature spontaneous, that his immediate reaction was simply to protect the ants, regardless of the danger that he put himself in. Now, he is, of course, at a Mahabharata platform, not recommended for everybody, but the opposite is also not recommended. Sometimes people go on a mental platform. That once Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was doing a yatra, and as happens in most of the spiritual places, religious places, that there are a lot of beggars, and they were begging, and his disciples were not giving any money. Right? And in the mind, Bhaktisiddhanta could see that in the mind, they were rationalizing it as that they are staying in a holy place of business. If you give them money, it's just for the body. What about the soul? And Bhaktisiddhanta immediately chastised them, saying that he sarcastically said that think that you're very, very elevated. Don't think like that. Right? So becoming too theoretical or abstract, it constrains one compassion. The third is that the nature of compassion is complete, that it is displayed uniformly, not to a particular person or object, not just to Indians and not Americans, not just to men and not women, right? Not just during the more holy times in the year and not otherwise, but it is complete. It stands on it itself. And the fourth is more an extension of the third, that it is exhibited with proper discrimination, which means that even though the compassion is complete, but it's not the same. Like in the case of Jat Bharat, we see that he dealt differently with his brothers, he dealt differently with the leader of the dacoits, and he dealt differently with King Rahugan. So these are the four qualities of compassion, that it is done regardless of if it puts oneself in difficulty, it's spontaneous, it's complete, and with proper discrimination. So in 1929, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in The Harmonist, he writes, so it's a nice snippet, he writes that Vaishnavism is the highest religion of transcendental love. It includes the essence of all teachings and at the same time surpasses them all. This is the religion of complete self-denial and absolute self-devotion to the Almighty, in which we act, live, and exist. It is implemented by the highest aspirations of the soul. By accepting Vaishnavism and following these noble teachings in life, anyone, regardless of social situation, religion, and skin color, gradually acquires the highest good, although sometimes his spiritual advancement is not always conscious. This is true for both men and women. Besides, Vaishnavism perfectly harmonizes with softness and tenderness, which are the main qualities of female nature. It is essentially a religion of caring kindness, tender love, and divine grace. So he talks about the importance of compassion in anyone's one who is a practicing devotee. Okay, verse 3.
When the palanquin carrier heard the threatening word of Maharaj Rahugana, they became very afraid of his punishment and began to speak to him as follows.
So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that there are four methods of dealing with opposition: Samadhan, Bhed, and Dand. And the king, he immediately went to the fourth method. So the shouting of the king is like chastisement. And Chakravarti Pad says that as per the political scriptures, the Shudra should be controlled by chastisement, which is what the king was following. Prabhupada says that according to political science, a king sometimes tries to pacify subordinates, sometimes chastises them, sometimes divides them, and sometimes rewards them. So these are Samadhan, Bhed, and Dand. In this way, the king rules his subordinates. The bearers of the palanquin could understand the king was angry and that he would chastise them. Okay, verse 4.
O Lord, please note that we are not at all negligent in discharging our duties. We have been faithfully carrying this palanquin according to your desire. But this man, who has been recently engaged to work with us, cannot walk very swiftly. Therefore, we are not able to carry the palanquin with him.
So we see a contrast over here. At one point, there is Jat Bharat, who is willing to put his own life in danger to protect the ants. And now we see the other palanquin bearers who are quick to blame Jat Bharat. And as soon as they saw the king shouting, they immediately, all three of them turned to Jat Bharat, saying that we are not at blame, he is at blame, so you have to punish him. Now, factually, he was at blame, but we see that mentality, that there is no sense of protection, compassion in them. The main instinct was self-preservation. So this also brings forth the dynamics of Sajati Sangha. So Sajati Sangha is associating with like-minded people. Now, we see that there is a stark difference between Jat Bharat and the other palanquin carriers because they are not Sajati. Jat Bharat is a self-realized soul, they are Shudras. So there is this disturbance that is being created. That the palanquin carriers are not able to do their duty. Their lives are being put into danger. Jat Bharat is unhappy. The king is unhappy. Why? Because it is not Sajati. So even amongst the Vaishnavas, one should take this into cognition. That one should always associate with those who are like-minded. So associating, so even though the sampradayas are bona fide, I have had the personal experience that one of the persons that who was coming to the temple, nice Vaishnava, Sri Sampradaya. And earlier on we were talking, it was a good relationship. But then as we talked more, then the philosophical differences started coming up. When the Sri Sampradaya, this is done, and we consider this. And he was not like criticizing, but he was dedicated to his guru, his way. And then there was, just like I was getting sometimes frustrated, sometimes bewildered, so was he. And then finally, we decided not to associate with one another. During the time of Samudra Manthan, we see that where two personalities were trying to serve Lord Vishnu. That when the Devas were trying to churn with the mountain, they were not able to pick up the mountain. So Lord Vishnu comes on the back of Garuda, he picks up the mountain, Garuda carries both the mountain and the Lord to the ocean, deposits it. And then the Lord turns to Kuruta and says, now you leave. Why? Because now Vasuki is coming and he will help in the churning of the mountain. So because they are natural enemies, Garuda and Vasuki, eagle and snake, then they are not Sajati. So even though they were both serving the Lord, but still one made place for another. So this is also a practical consideration for us. Srila Prabhupada says that the other palanquin carriers were Shudras. And Jat Bharat was not only a high caste Brahman, like Angira, he was in the lineage of Angira, but also a great devotee. Shudras do not sympathize with other living beings, but a Vaishnava cannot act like a Shudra. When a Shudra and a Brahman Vaishnava are combined, they will certainly be imbalanced in the execution of duties. The Shudras were walking with the palanquin without caring for the ants. But Jat Bharat could not, and therefore difficulty arose. Okay. Verse 5.
King Rahugana could understand the speeches given by the courier, who were afraid of being punished. He could also understand that simply due to the fault of one person, the palanquin was not being carried properly. Knowing this perfectly well and hearing their appeal, he became a little angry. Although he was very advanced in political science and was very experienced, his anger arose due to his inborn nature as a king. Actually, King Rahugana's mind was covered by the mode of passion, and he therefore spoke as follows to Jat Bharat, whose Brahman effulgence was not clearly visible, being covered like a fire covered by ashes.
So we see the anger of Maharaj Rahugana. Right? Earlier we said that he is in the mode of goodness. Vishnu Chakravarti says that he became a little angry because it was the nature as a king. So even though he was wise, he had received knowledge from the sages, but as a king, the king is by nature is Rajasic. So because of his nature, he became a little angry. But he is still considered to be in the mode of goodness because he was not bewildered by that anger. Right? But when in the mode of passion, one actually becomes consumed. And ultimately it goes down to the mode of ignorance. But Rahugana, because of his stature as a king, he became angry. Now, on the other hand, Jat Bharat, even though he is being snitched upon by the other palanquin bearers, he is being chastised by the king, he does not give up his mode of transcendental goodness. The Prabhupada says that the distinction between Rajo and Satoguna is explained in this verse. Although the king was very upright and advanced in political science and government management, he was nonetheless in the mode of passion. And due to a slight agitation, he became angry. Jat Bharat, despite all kinds of injustice, endured because of his deaf and dumb display. He remained silent by the strength of his spiritual advancements. Nonetheless, his Brahmateja, his Brahman effulgence, was indistinctly visible in his person. Okay, next verse.
King Rahugana told Jat Bharat, how troublesome this is. My dear brother, you certainly appear very fatigued because you have carried this palanquin alone without assistance for a long time and for a long distance. Besides that, due to your old age, you have become greatly troubled. My dear friend, I said you are not very firm, not very strong and stood. Are not you fellow carrier cooperating with you? In this way, the king criticized Jat Bharat with sarcastic words. Yet, despite being criticized in this way, Jat Bharat had no bodily conception of the situation. He knew that he was not the body, for he had attained his spiritual identity. He was neither fat, lean, nor thin, nor had he anything to do with a lump of matter, a combination of 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. He had nothing to do with the material body and his 2 hands and legs. In other words, he had completely realized his spiritual identity, Aham Brahmasmi. He was therefore unaffected by this sarcastic criticism from the king. Without saying anything, he continued carrying the palanquin as before.
So this is one of the key verses that forms the basis of further discussion. So the allegations leveled by king in this verse will then be countered by Jat Bharat, which will then be, that countering will be further countered by King Rahugana, and that will further be explained in the subsequent chapters. So this verse kind of is the seed, this and the next verse, kind of the seed of the discussion between the two. So we see that the king is speaking in a very sarcastic way, right? So he says that you must be tired from carrying the palanquin for a long time over such a long distance, right? And now Jat Bharat, he had just begun to carry the palanquin and he had just traveled a short distance when he started zigzagging toward the ants. But sarcastically he says that, oh, you must be so tired because you have been carrying this palanquin for such a long distance, for such a long time, right? First point made by him. Second, he says is, you must be old and unhealthy without any strong limbs, which is also sarcasm, because Jat Bharat was not old, he was young. He was not unhealthy, he was glowing with health. And he did not have weak limbs. He had stout and strong limbs. Third point he made is that, are your fellow carriers not cooperating with, which is again sarcasm, because Jat Bharat was the one who was not cooperating with the fellow carriers. So Sukadev Goswami explains that this criticism in the context of Jat Bharat's is going to reveal his actual elevated position. So Jat Bharat, when the king is basically saying that you are weak and your limbs are you're unhealthy and weak, then factually speaking, the point that is being made is that Jat Bharat did not relate to his gross body. So Maharaj Raghunath, he sarcastically comments that you are my brother. It's sarcasm because he's the king and he's a Shudra, or at least he thought he was a Shudra, but he's sarcastically saying, oh, my brother, like, really, can you be my brother? Or he's giving him more subtle insults in terms of your body and your commitment. So Jat Bharat heard all this, but at this point he does not say anything. And two reasons are given for that. First is that he was already situated at the Brahmabhuta platform, at the spiritual platform. So he did not have the conception of I and mine. So he did not have the conception of duality, of honor and insult. Right? So for him it didn't matter. So he did not respond. Second is that Jat Bharat already had a body that was completely spiritual. And Srila Prabhupada substantiates this by relating the incident with the dacoits. He says that Jat Bharat was completely liberated. He did not even care when the dacoits attempted to kill his body. He knew that he was certainly not the body. Even if the body was killed, he would not have cared, for he was thoroughly convinced of the proposition found in Bhagavad Gita 2:20, Na hanyate hanemane sharira. He knew that he could not be killed even if his body was killed. but he was established in his spiritual identity. So for most of the jivas in the material world, the body is a distinct covering of the spirit soul. And Prabhupada says that the body is created according to one's karma and material nature. And it supplies the ingredients for the development of a certain kind of body. So the soul the body covers is different from the bodily construction. Right? The gross body is different from the spiritual soul. Therefore, anything favorable or mischievous done to the body does not affect the spirit soul. The Vedic injunction is asangohayam purusha. The spirit soul is always unaffected by material arrangements. So this was the conception of Jat Bharat. Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this saying that actually, like Sukadeva Goswami, Jat Bharat had a completely spiritual body. Now, we all have spiritual bodies, but Jat Bharat, when they say that Jat Bharat had a completely spiritual body, which means that even his gross body was spiritual, because he was on the realized spiritual platform. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that it was because of the arousal of prema for the Lord at this time. He actually did not have possessiveness for anything except the Lord. However, because of not attaining direct service of the Lord at the moment, he manifested humility, produced from increased longing, and therefore did not offer his sense of I to the Lord. So the logical question is that if his body was completely spiritual, what was he doing in the material world? He should have gone back to Godhead. And Vishnu Chakravarti explains that Jat Bharat had still not attained the direct service of the Lord. And considering that he had not attained the direct service, out of humility, he did not accept the fact that his body was spiritual. And therefore, he did not offer the sense of I, because he considered the sense of I to be material. He did not offer his sense of I to the Lord. Because of this, Jat Bharat made a show of having a material body, even though it was full of knowledge. Therefore, taking the superficial meaning, it appears that Sukadeva Goswami describes his body as material. Right? When you read the verse, you could read it both ways. Superficially, he was describing it as material, because Jat Bharat was considering it as material. Not because it was, but because of his humility. So, the last phrase appears to mean, in the final body made of gross elements, senses, karma, and antakarna produced by Maya, a body which is insubstantial, though having a particular experience. Right, so this is how Sukadeva Goswami describes the body of Jat Bharat. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti says, however, it should be explained that Sukadeva Goswami's real opinion was that Jat Bharat had a spiritual body. And then he analyzes the Sanskrit. He says that avidyaya rachita dravya guna karmasya swacharama kalevara means that can also be understood to mean that in his eternal body that remained, after all previous bodies have been destroyed, which are not made of material elements, sense, karma, and antakarna. Right? So that's one interpretation, that he was in a body that was not made of matter. And then he says that Suacharma Kalvera could also read as Swa Acharma Kalvera, means that he was in his original self body, Swa Acharma Kalvera, that he was in his spiritual body. So this means that the body was absolute, since it did not have any prarabdha karma. That the body belonged to Vaikuntha Loka, Samsthan Vishesha. He simply acted like a material person out of humility arising from prema. So we see the similar sense of humility in the fourth canto in the case of Prithu Maharaj. So there it is said that Prithu Maharaj took to the process of Brahma Vidya to destroy his subtle body, and then he gave up the process. But Prithu Maharaj, he never had a subtle body because he was always completely absorbed in bhakti. His subtle body was completely destroyed. But there we had said there were two reasons why Prithu Maharaj took to the process of Brahma Vidya to destroy the subtle body. One is the same reason, Jat Bharat, out of humility. He did not consider himself to be an advanced person that my subtle body is destroyed. So he took to that process. And the second is out of an overabundance of caution. Like the analogy was given is that a person may have a strong digestion, but when he's traveling, he may take digestive aid just to be sure that there are no digestive troubles. So similarly, Prithu Maharaj, out of an overabundance of caution, he said, just in case I have a subtle body, let me take to this process of Brahma Vidya. Right? So either out of humility or out of an overabundance of caution, the devotees, they take to the processes that they don't really need to take to, or they identify themselves at platforms that is much lower than the level of exhaustion. There's a pastime of Srila Prabhupada being in a plane, and Prabhupada was standing and talking to his disciples, and there were so many disciples. So those were the days when people could actually come all the way into the plane to say farewell. So his disciples were all crowded in the aisles, and they were talking and chatting with Prabhupada. But the other passengers, they were getting hassled. So then the air hostesses, they started complaining that clear the aisles, clear the aisles. So then one of the disciples, then he takes up and he kind of speaks in a loud voice, saying that all devotees move out of the aisles and get into the seats. And so the devotees went, and Prabhupada also immediately stepped out of the aisle and went into the seat. And the disciples felt very embarrassed. He said, no, Prabhupada, I didn't mean to tell you. And Prabhupada smiled and he said, why? Am I not a devotee? So just out of humility, Prabhupada considered himself, he did not say, oh, I'm so exalted, this is not meant for me. In Mayapur, one of Prabhupada's disciples shares that this was when before the temple was even built. So they had these temporary restrooms that people would go to pass stool, and they would, devotees who would line up while one person was in there, they would line up waiting for the turn. And then one person said he was standing with his gamcha, and he turns around and Prabhupada is standing behind him. And Prabhupada was peaceful. He said, no, I'll wait my turn. So even though he was Paramahamsa on an exalted platform, but never made a show of it, never out of natural humility, not artificial humility, out of natural humility. And perhaps, like second reason is given, perhaps out of an overabundance of caution. And maybe there is some pride in me. Let me make sure that I don't act upon it. Okay, we'll do one more verse and then pause for any discussion.
Thereafter, when the king saw that his palanquin was still being shaken by the courier, he became very angry and said, you rascal, what are you doing? Are you dead despite the life within your body? Do you know that I am your master? You are disregarding me and are not carrying out my order. For this disobedience, I shall now punish you just as Yamraj, the superintendent of death, punishes sinful people. I shall give you proper treatment so that you will come to your senses and do the correct thing.
Okay, so we see that Lalita Mataji, you may want to mute yourself.
I muted her, Prabhu.
You did, okay, thank you. So we see that initially the palanquin was moving this way and that way, and Maharaj Raghuna chastises, and Jat Bharat quietly he keeps carrying, but he's still doing the same thing. He's still moving zigzag toward the hands, so the palanquin is still being jostled, and now Maharaj Raghuna is even more angry. So he chastises him. He gives makes 3 additional chastisements. Previously there were 3 points for which he was chastised. That you must be tired from carrying the palanquin for a long time over such a long distance. You must be old and unhealthy without strong legs, and your fellow carriers are not cooperating with you. Now he says that more directly, he says, are you dead despite the life within your body? And because a person who does not respond to whether it is advice or whether it is provocation is as good as dead. So Jat Bharat is like, I just told you not to act in this when you're still doing so. Are you dead despite the life within your body? And then he says that, don't you know that I am your master? Right? So he's thinking that maybe the other reason could be that he does not consider me as a master. That's why he's disregarding my instructions. So he's reminding, don't you know that I am your master? And then finally he says, you're mad. And for this disobedience, I shall punish you so that you can come to your senses. Right? So these 6 points of chastisement, like I said, will now be refuted by Jat Bharat, and the refutation of Jat Bharat will be refuted by Maharaj Rahugana, and then the refutation of the refutation will be expanded upon by further by Jat Bharat in the subsequent chapters. So let me pause here and see if there is any comments or discussion.
Am I being heard?
Yeah.
Is it a fact that the liberated soul doesn't have the subtle body? Have I heard correctly? Just wondering.
So the explanation that is given is that when the liberated soul exists in the material world, then the gross and subtle body is not a result of their past karma, but it's a result of the desire to preach. So yes, they have a gross body because we can see it. They have a subtle body because they have senses. But the purpose is different. They are not carrying the gross and subtle body because of the cycle of fulfilling their material desires, but simply to fulfill the desires of the Lord, fulfill their own desires to preach. Right. So we had talked about the prarabdha karma. And the prarabdha karma is of 2 kinds. One is the prarabdha karma that is created by the cycle of karma, and the second is the prarabdha karma that is created by the will of the Lord, the auspicious prarabdha karma. When we were discussing the fall down of Bharat Maharaj, then we had a fairly lengthy discussion on prarabdha karma. So the distinction between, even though externally they look the same, But the distinction is that one is simply material and the second is spiritual. So they may have, or they will have a material and spiritual body, a subtle body, but it is there by the will of the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Another point you were mentioning about the point how out of humility the pure devotee or the liberated devotee, he doesn't display, his true qualities or his exalted position. You give two examples. Is it the same as when we hear that sometimes the Uttama Adhikari, he steps down to the Madhyam platform to preach? Is it
it's the same. The
Same.
point that is made that Jat Bharat was preaching to people, recognizing their moods. Like to the dacoits, he preached in a certain way. They're the mode of ignorance. To his brothers, he preached in a different way, the mode of passion. To the king, he preaches in a different way, the mode of goodness. So even though he was transcendental, he was Paramhamsa, which means that in the Paramhamsa platform, he's unable to see the distinction between the modes because they just see the soul. But for the purpose of preaching, he's coming down to a lower platform, distinguishing between the modes and then preaching according to the modes. So it's their additional compassion that they actually step down from their natural platform as a service to others.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
One clarification, Prabhu, like this is again this is my understanding. Clarification: the liberated soul. If I'm talking prior to Prabhupada, if you would have heard, they would take samadhi. Right after they work what they've done in this world, they used to take samadhi. I don't know if it is. So how is that understanding that they realize that their purpose is fulfilled and they have some other assigned task by Krishna to go? Or what is the purpose of samadhi? That was some question when. Is that the purpose? Like they've fulfilled their purpose over here and they're moving on?
You mean why do they die? Or why is the
Well,
body not
they
gone?
used to take samadhi, right? Those liberated souls. Like if you know what is, there are several in
So
South
you mean they
India,
would
they do.
voluntarily give up their body?
Voluntary, they give up the body, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a specific. I haven't heard this question asked specifically, so I haven't read to it. But logically speaking, what you're saying makes sense. That the service is done, and for conventional reasons also. If they keep, like if they continue living, then it would be a disturbance for other people also. So for conventional reasons, they give up their body. That's probably why they give it up. And that's why the bodies are also preserved, because the body is not considered material. Like this, the material body is burned so that it returns to material elements. But for the advanced devotees, the body is preserved in samadhi, is considered to be spiritual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Moving on to verse 8.
Thinking himself a king, King Rahugana was in the bodily conception and was influenced by material nature's mode of passion and ignorance. Due to madness, he chastised Jat Bharat with uncalled for and contradictory word. Jat Bharat was a topmost devotee and the dear abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although considering himself very learned, the king did not know about the position of an advanced devotee situated in devotional service. Nor did he know his characteristic. Jat Bharat was a residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He always carried the form of the Lord within his heart. He was a dear friend of all living entities, living beings, and he did not entertain any bodily conception. He therefore smiled and spoke the following words.
So this verse contrasts the position of Jat Bharat and Maharaj Rahugana. Right? So Rahugana is described as Nara Deha Vimanam. Right? So Deva Vimanam. Abhimanam means that proud, that Naradev. Naradev is king. King is considered to be the god amongst humans. So Naradeva Manam. So he was proud of being a king, right? And Panditamanam. And he also considered himself to be very learned, right? So these are the more subtle symptoms. The gross symptom was that Bhashamanam, that he's so angry that Bhashamanam means that he's stuttering, he's speaking incoherently when he's chastising Jat Bharat, right? And Tiraskrata means that not understanding the position of Jat Bharat, he is insulting. So this is the position of the king, and Prabhupada contrasted with that of Jat Bharat. Right? He says that being self-reliant, Jat Bharat, who was fully situated on the transcendental platform, did not at all become angry. He smiled and began to deliver his teachings to Rahugana. Right. So here it says that that samyamana iva. Samyamana iva means that iva means like, and samyamana means slightly smiling. Vishnu Chakravarti says that it means that he was internally smiling. He did not smile externally. Then Prabhupada talks about that if the conduct of Jat Bharat is the gold standard, then what about Vaishnavas who become angry? So Prabhupada says sometimes Vaishnavas superficially become angry at non-devotees, but this is good for the non-devotee. And he says that how Narad Muni became angry at the sons of Kuber, Narkuber and Managriv, but ultimately it was for their benefit, right? So the superficial anger of the Vaishnavas is actually for the benefit. And even the Prabhupada says non-devotees, but even when Vaishnavas, like when the Guru is angry at the disciple, it's superficial anger because it is essentially to purify the disciple. Prabhupada would be angry at the materialists. He would call them mulhas and rascals, but it was superficial because it was ultimately for their own benefit. Okay. Next verse, 9.
The great Brahmana Jat Bharat said, "My dear king and hero, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is certainly true. Actually, these are not simply words of chastisement, for the body is a carrier. The load carrier by the body does not belong to me, for I am the spirit soul. There is no contradiction in your statement because I am different from the body. I am not the carrier of the palanquin. The body is a carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the palanquin, for I am detached from the body. You have said that I am not stout and strong, and these words are benefiting to a person who does not know the distinction between the body and the soul. The body may be fat or thin, but no learned man would say such thing of the spirit soul. As far as the spirit soul is concerned, I am neither fat nor skinny. Therefore, you are correct when you say that I am not very stout. Also, if the object of this journey and the path leading there were mine, there would be many troubles for me. But because they relate not to me, but to my body, there is no trouble at all.
So these are long translations, and to some extent, because Prabhupada also expands with a little bit of explanations in the translations. So from verses 9 to 15, we will see Jat Bharat's reply to Maharaj Rahugana, right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that at this point Jat Bharat is thinking that I will show mercy on the king. Since he thinks he has knowledge, I will first defeat him with knowledge. Right? So Jat Bharat now speaks in, so the nature of Gyanis is that they speak in riddles. They speak in apparent contradictions. Right? So we see that in Maharaj Rahugana also, that initially he was sarcastically chastising Jat Bharat, that you must be tired from carrying the palanquin for such a long distance over such a long time. And you must be old and unhealthy without strong limbs. Right? If you remove the sarcasm, what Maharaj Rahugana was saying was that you're not at all tired because you haven't carried the palanquin for a long time. And you haven't walked with this load, so you should not be tired. And on top of that, you are young and healthy with strong limbs. So Jat Bharat says that even though you are speaking to me sarcastically, I do not consider it as sarcasm because whatever you say is correct. How is that? He said that if the burden of the palanquin belonged to me, then what you are saying can be accepted as sarcasm. However, since I'm different from the body, then I'm not the carrier. So when you say that, I'm not the carrier, so I should not be tired, the statements you speak can be considered to be sarcastic if I was the body. Since I am not the body, your statements are actually without deceit. Right? So when King Rahugana is apparently saying that you must be old and unhealthy without strong limbs, then Jat Bharat is saying that even though you are sarcastic when you're saying that, but I don't accept it because I don't accept that I am the body. So whether I'm strong or old or healthy or unhealthy does not really matter. So you see, your statements are actually without deceit. So this is the way of the Gyanis, that the person are essentially defeating the other person based on tattva. Now, Maharaj Rahugana had also said that you have not come a long way. And he says that sarcastically, that you have not come a long way. So Jat Bharat says that if the destination of the traveler or the path of the traveler belonged to me, then it would be sarcasm. However, since the path of travel and the destination belongs to the body and I am not the body, you are correct in saying that I have not been traveling. Right? So he is accepting the external premise that you are right, I have not traveled a long way because I have nothing to do with either the traveling or the reaching the destination. So then he says, you're also right that because I'm detached from the body, I'm actually not fatigued at carrying the load of the palanquin. And finally, Maharaj Raghunath says that you are not stout. Jad Bharat says, you are right. Because as a spirit soul, I'm neither stout or thin. I am simply a spirit soul. So it's a little bit of Jad Bharat playing the role of a Jnani and defeating Maharaj Rahugana, who considered himself to be Jnani. But the essential message that he's giving is, I am not the body, but the spirit soul. That's the essential message that comes in actually these 5 verses from 9 to 13. Right? It may seem to be a very basic concept, but Jad Bharat makes it, just like Krishna makes it at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, and then he builds upon it. Prabhupada says that the practice of austerity and penance is meant for understanding the distinction between the body and the soul, and how the soul can be unaffected by the pleasures and pains of the body. Jad Bharat was actually situated on the platform of self-realization. He was completely aloof from the bodily conception. Therefore, he immediately took this position and convinced the king that whatever contradictory things that the king had said about his body did not actually apply to him as a spirit soul. Okay, moving on, verse 10. So these are now with meter, so I can recite the verse and then Prabhu can read the translation. Stolyam karshayam vyadayadayascha shutrad bhayam kalirecha jaracha nidraratir manayoraham madha sucho dehena jatasya himina shanti.
Fatness, thinness, bodily and mental distress, thirst, anger, fear, disagreement, desires for material happiness, old age, sleep, attachment for material possession, anger, lamentation, illusion, and identification of the body with the self are all transformation of material covering of the spirit soul. A person absorbed in the material bodily concept is affected by these things, but I am free from all bodily conception. Consequently, I am neither fat nor skinny, nor anything else you have mentioned.
So Jad Bharat continues on the same theme. He says that not only am I not well nourished, but no bodily quality belongs to me. The one who is born with the body, the jiva who identifies with the body, certainly has all these qualities. Right? So he said, because I do not identify with the body, I don't have any of them. People, and Vishnu Chakravarti then says, people who identify with the body only. Now, important point to note that he's saying that who only identify with, exclusively identify with the body, he says they are Dvipath Pashu, or 2-legged animals. Right? So the basic point that Bharat is saying to the king that whatever you say about the body doesn't matter, because I'm not the body. Right? You say that my body is stout or thin, I'm the soul. I can be neither stout or thin. You say the body is tired, I'm the soul. I can never be tired. So I've been traveling for a long time, and I've been carrying the load. So I have nothing to do with this travel. I'm not the body. The body is traveling. So I have nothing to do with either travel or the destination. Right. So he said, consequently, I'm neither fat nor skinny nor anything else you have mentioned. So Prabhupada says that it is not possible for everyone to immediately become a self-realized person like Jad Bharat. However, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Right? So Prabhupada says that maybe this is the platform at which Jad Bharat was, that completely not identifying with the material body, but for others it's a process. And the process he recommends is by Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Later on he says that Madhvacharya says that those who are too materially affected continue the bodily conception. Such persons are concerned with different bodily symptoms, whereas one freed from bodily conception lives without the body, even in material conditions. Okay, let's move on to the next verse. Jivan mritatvam niyamena rajan adyantavadyad vikritasya drishtam swaswamya bhavo dhruvadyayatra taryuchyate so vidikratya yoga.
My dear king, you have unnecessarily accused me of being dead, though alive. In this regard, I can only say that this is a case everywhere because everything material has its beginning and end. As far as you're thinking that you are the king and the master and are thus trying to order me, this is also incorrect because these positions are temporary. Today, you are the king and I am your servant, but tomorrow the position may change. And you may be my servant, I am your master, and I your master. These are temporary circumstances created by the providence.
So Jat Bharat has addressed the three chastisements of Maharaj Raghunath from verse 6. So remember in verse 6 and 7, there were 6 chastisements, 3 in verse 6 and 3 in verse 7. So I'll give you a table of these, so you don't have to note it. Later on, I'll make a table and send it to you. So now in verse 7, he had also had 3 more chastisements. He had said that, are you dead despite the life within your body? And then he said, don't you know that I'm your master and you're disregarding me? And then finally he says, you're mad. And for this disobedience, I will punish you so that you can come to your senses. Right? So to the first chastisement, are you dead despite the life within the body? Jat Bharat says that you have said that I'm living but dead. If you're defining me in terms of the bodily identity, then living while dead does not belong to me only. And he says everybody is living but while dead. Why? Because the body is dead and the soul is living. So everything is seen as a transformation, since everything material has a beginning and an end and is constantly changing. Right? So that's how he negates the accusation that are you dead despite having life within your body? He says, yes, you are right. I am dead despite having life in the body because material body is dead, but I am the soul that is living. Then the second accusation was that, don't you know that I am your master? And Jat Bharat responds, he says that you say that I am disobeying the orders of the master. This implies that we are fixed in this relationship of me being the servant, Swa, and you being the master, Swamya. Right? Then one can make such a statement like, this person is fit to carry the palanquin. Then Jat Bharat says, but however, things might change. It may be that the kingdom may be taken away from you and I take the kingdom. Then I am the master and you are the servant. So what is the point in you saying that, don't you know that I am the master? Because you're only the master here and now. Tomorrow things may be completely different. Right? So he is defeating that point too. Srila Prabhupada preaches on this point where Jat Bharat says that about the master servant, Prabhupada preaches that Krishna is the only master. So all other master servants, the positions change, can change. There was once a play we had done at the temple about who is the real master. It was a funny play where a person says, I want to serve the absolute master, and then he sees a powerful person in the village and he says, I'll serve you. But then another person comes and this person is very scared and he says, oh, you're scared of the person. Then he goes to the other person, and then the king comes and he says, I'll serve the king. And then the Brahman comes and he says, I'll serve the Brahman. And then he sees the Brahman serving Krishna, and then he says, okay, I'll serve the Lord. So Prabhupada says that other than the position of Krishna, who is the master, and that position never changes. Now, Krishna may take on a subservient role, but he takes on that role. He never gives up his position as being a master. Like, a father might, to please the child, the father might get onto the knees and become a horse, and the child jumps on the father's back, but the father is always the father, regardless of what is going on. So Prabhupada says that Krishna is always Krishna. His position never changes. Like Ekale Ishvara Krishna Arasab Bhrati. Ekale Ishvara Krishna. Only one master, that is Krishna, Arasab Bhrati. Everybody else is servant, including the demigods, including Lord Vishnu, including personalities like Lord Balaram. Everybody else is servant. Okay, we'll do one more verse and then we'll pause to see if there's any discussion. Verse 12. Vishesh buddhir vivaram manakcha pashyam yana vyavaharatonnya kaishvarastatra kimeshit vayam tatha virajan Karavamakimte.
My dear king, if you still think that you are the king and that I am your servant, you should order me, and I shall follow your order. I can then say that this differentiation is temporary, and it expands only from usage or convention. I do not see any other cause. In that case, who is a master and who is a servant? Everyone is being forced by law of material nature. Therefore, no one is master and no one is servant. Nonetheless, if you think that you are the master and I am the servant, I shall accept this. Please order me. What can I do for you?
So this is not Jat Bharat being sarcastic, but being humble. So at one point he's stating the real tattva, that there is no distinction. This master servant, their master and servant position keeps changing, but then he says that yes, I recognize that right now you are the master and I am the servant. If you think you are the master and I am the servant, then order me and let me know what I should do. And so Prabhupada says that for some time we play as master or servant as actors play on the stage. Similarly, while we're in the human form, we should try to put an end to this nonsensical stage performance. So this whole relativistic position of being master and servant, Prabhupada said we should put an end to it and come to a constitutional position of Krishna consciousness, where we know that there is only one master, that is Krishna. Of course, for a pure devotee, everybody can become a master, but that's because of the relationship with Krishna, not because of a relative platform. But the reason that realization does not dawn, Prabhupada says, Devi Aisha Gunamai Mamaya Duratiyaya, that it is because of Devi Aisha Gunamai, because of this bewildering nature of energy of Krishna, we are becoming servants and masters. But if we agree to be controlled by the Lord and become his eternal servants, the temporary condition will cease to exist. So we see that Jat Bharat is speaking very, very basic teachings to the king. He's essentially reiterating the same point over and over again, that I am not the body, but the eternal soul. So everything that is related to the body is temporary, inconsequential. Right? Now, one may question that the king is also an accomplished scholar, and so is Jat Bharat. Why is he speaking such basic knowledge? The example that is given is that we see that students who are sincere, They will prepare for the exam, and before the exam, they will revise the syllabus. So they are not learning anything new at that time, but they are revising it so that when they write the answers, then everything is fresh. They want to make sure they haven't forgotten anything. So this is what happens when Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Like he starts from the basic building block. So basic knowledge he gives, not because Arjuna did not have the knowledge, but it was revision. It was restating it as making it a platform for further instructions. So Jat Bharat is establishing the basics with Maharaj Raghunandan that will then be the foundation for further instructions. Right? Now, in case of Krishna and Arjuna, Krishna felt the need to revise to Arjuna because Arjuna was confused in the battlefield. Jat Bharat feels the need to give it to Maharaj Raghunandan because the intelligence of Maharaj Raghunandan was eclipsed by too much indulgence in material conception. So even though he knew, he is reminding. Right? So we see that sometimes in ourselves also, that we are constantly looking for new things, esoteric things. Sometimes people sometimes make a business out of it, that they will try to extract esoteric meanings, and that way they will speak and people get attracted by it, which is a mistake. Right? The Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, they take the same basic concepts and reiterate it over and over again in different ways, because those are the concepts that will automatically yield the higher realizations. One cannot get to the top of the building unless each and every building, the story of the building has been put in place. Right? Once a disciple asked Prabhupada that in all your classes you keep saying the same thing, that you are not the body, surrender to Krishna. You don't say anything new. Why do you keep repeating the same thing? And Prabhupada said, because you do not get it. Once you get it, I will speak other things. Right? So Prabhupada was witty in his reply, but also factual, that one should not aspire for getting esoteric meanings out of things just for the sake of it. Right? The focus of the teachings of the acharyas, the focus of the scriptures is to strongly anchor us in the basic platform. Basic platform is Atma Gyan. I am not the body, I am the soul. Basic platform is that Jivere Sarupa Krishna Nityadas. Those are the basic things that are established. One does not have to indulge too much in the esoteric aspects of it. Okay, I'll stop here and see if we have any discussion a little over time. Okay, if not, we'll stop here, and hopefully Wednesday we will finish this chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. Nice mixture of gyan and sweetness also. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.